Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, one of the biggest drawbacks I see around the future of the Metaverse that we keep reading about is convincing Sheila and Jeff in finance that they need to strap a headset on their face for their upcoming Metaverse meeting. Because anyone that has seen how the tech in the average meeting room doesn't work and usually takes 10 minutes to get the projector and the HDMI cables working will know that pain point very, very well. But a company called Topia recently appeared on my radar because they're helping companies and universities adapt to these new learning environments without any special tech required at all. You just use your computer. So I wanted to learn more about how companies can use the Metaverse today, right now, not in the future, but today, and use the Metaverse to create value for their prospects, their customers, and their community, all through real-time interaction platforms and Web3 decentralized databases. It's incredibly cool technology. But I also want to explore how different technology trends can converge into systems and paradigm shifts, and how people can actually prepare, gain skills, and shape their expectations for the future. This is one of those incredibly cool interviews that I hope will make you go away and just give it a try and see what you think, and then report back to me. But buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the US, where Daniel Liebskin is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are, what you do, and maybe share your origin story too?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. It's really wonderful to be here. And, for me, I've been a software builder. I've been a product builder for about a decade now. When I was a kid, I built video games. I then went into investment banking at Lehman Brothers and was there during the fall of Lehman, acquired by Barclays Capital, so UK bank. Then I was an investor at Summit Partners, which is a venture capital growth capital investor. And I was talking to entrepreneurs all day and realized that on my entrepreneurial journey, you just have to actually. When you talk to entrepreneurs, really the thing they have is a deep burning passion for something. Yeah. And I had a lot of passions, a lot of, just energy and opinions, and realized that, I need to get back into for my journey. I wanted to get back into coding like I had when I was a kid and be able to just be a sorcerer again, right? Be able to actually have an idea, have a vision for something, and then be able to manifest it, be able to build it. And so, I spent a couple of years just refining my skills, learning how to, doing some dev work, like consulting dev work. I had my first, what is now referred to as the Metaverse startup in 2014. So Topia actually is using a technology called WebRTC. It was, it's been around for a bit, but was very novel, very new in 2014. And I built a company around that called Body that was similar to Topia in some ways and quite different in other ways. But it was part of this idea of the internet moving from something that's just asynchronous, that is strongly centralized, and that is not really that real time or interactive, towards an internet that is now referred to as Web3 or the Metaverse, that is more real time, that is more decentralized, that is interactive, synchronous. And so, I had passion for that back in 2014. I've also been really deep in different communities for my entire life, from camp to running my own communities in college, to joining different communities in my travels as a digital nomad living in Bali and Thailand. And I also came across a lot of creators through these different communities and through my different journeys. And so Topia really is a culmination of these different passions: the internet evolution, community platforms, creator ecosystems, and really empowering creators. And so it's kind of bringing together everything I've ever been interested in. And at a time when I think the world really needs solutions for having stronger community and a place to come together and play online.
And listening to you talk there is your passion for communities throughout pretty much your whole life. It's a big part of who you are. So it's easy to see how you've ended up at Topia, which is allowing businesses to create social experiences for their brand and communities and ultimately bring their community to the metaverse and experience the future of the internet. But can you just introduce the listeners to exactly what it is and the kind of problems that you're solving with tech?
Yeah, so Topia is an attempt to give people the serendipity that you have at in-person gatherings online. And so a simple way to think about this, the sort of long form way of describing it is that when you're at an in-person event and there's 100 people at the event or 1,000 people at the event, there's no way physically for you to talk to all 1,000 people at a time and have them be able to talk to you. Instead, what happens in person is you wind up talking to a few people that are in your proximity, and you're in a little group and you're talking, and whenever you want, you can walk around and join another group or talk to another person and sort of have serendipity, have small, more intimate conversations within the context of 1,000 people. And so our platform lets you do that online. There could be 1,000 people in a highly customized world, and you click and you move around and you connect over audio and video. So kind of like Zoom connections to anybody that's in your closest proximity. And then you can click and you move around and you join another group. You can talk to another person. You can experience the world around you. So, one way to think about it is kind of like the building capabilities of something like a Minecraft with Zoom video chat to only those that are close to you. And in that way, you can have 1,000 people and it's many to many. Everybody's talking to each other rather than just one person at a time talking to the entire group. And you can do things like broadcasting. You can have one person or a panel of people talking to the entire group, but the entire group then can talk amongst themselves while they're in this broadcast experience.
And I absolutely love that. I'm a big fan of serendipity. I think it's something that every business underestimates. And some of the best friendships that you encounter throughout your life often comes from those happy accidents where you're thrust into a situation with someone that normally you would never meet or possibly even speak with. So I think it's fantastic what you're doing. And as we're talking about putting it into the metaverse now, and it's such a big buzzword at the minute, can you just set the scene and tell me what your definition of the metaverse is, and also talk a little bit about this real-time interaction platform versus Web3 decentralized databases? Because I think that's when it starts getting a little bit complicated for people outside of the tech industry.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think you actually did just kind of define it in some ways. Yeah. At least the way that I think about it. So the metaverse, that's a relatively new term in popular parlance, but it's been around since the book Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. It was actually describing a dystopian outcome here, which we can talk about in a bit. But, I think of the metaverse as the evolution of the internet in two different ways. One, as I was sort of saying before, is from something that's asynchronous, where as an example of asynchronous is email, right? Where somebody writes something and then sometime later somebody replies, and it's not real time interactive, right? It's not real time in the way that a phone call or even Zoom or meeting in person is. And so the internet has historically been only asynchronous. Now we have things like video chat and voice over IP that make it more real time. But again, it's still not that interactive with context around you. And so the internet is now having options with the emergence of new protocols like WebRTC, which is Web Real-Time Communication Technology, allows for real-time interactions to be built into platforms themselves. And so the internet is evolving that way. And there still will be asynchronous communication. There is a lot of value in that. There's leverage in it. But now we have options for real-time interaction. The other way the internet is evolving is historically everything was highly centralized. And one way to think about that is databases within big companies. So if you're on Facebook as an example, then you are interacting with their centralized database where Facebook owns all of your data. And anytime you interact in any way, it's all happening within a walled garden that is controlled by Facebook, that is centralized. One of the prospects of Web3, that's Web 2 way of doing things. Yeah. One of the ideas of Web3, which is sort of part of this emerging metaverse, is to have more decentralization. And so when you're interacting with the platform, rather than that company owning all of your data and all of your interactions, instead having that database be something that is public, that is decentralized, that is accessible by multiple platforms, and where the true owner is actually the user themselves. And you're able then to bring your identity, to bring your assets, to bring your images, your experiences, and your communities themselves between different companies, between different platforms. And so, it's very creator centric, it's very user centric as an idea. And that's something that, I'm pretty excited about, this idea of the interoperable, decentralized internet, where databases are not controlled and owned by a single company, but instead are kind of owned by the public. And that's where things like blockchain get kind of interesting. But there's a lot of different forms of this. And so when you think about the internet evolving from Web 2 to Web 3, it really is going from asynchronous and centralized. All your data is controlled by one company, and experiences are not that interactive or social, to towards something that is much more social, much more interactive, more real time, and where the data in your communities actually live beyond just one centralized company, but instead can be used across the entire interoperable Web3 metaverse.
And I think it's worth highlighting as well that brands from Nike to Skechers to Forever 21 are all brands that have made significant moves to enter the metaverse and doing quite well out of it too, I might add. So for business leaders listening and thinking about making the move, how can companies better use the metaverse today to create value and tangible results for their prospects, customers, and ultimately community too?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of the things that people are trying to figure out, right? Yeah. In some ways, this idea of the metaverse emerged before a lot of business cases. What we're finding at Topia is that one of the most valuable ways of thinking about this is as a real-time community tool. And so when you think about community, your employees are a community, right? Your customers can be a community. Your prospects even can be a community. And so just taking the employee community as an easy example, one of the challenges with the remote work shift is that people don't really feel that they are actually part of an employee community. And so you find higher churn, you find more mercenary-like employee behavior, and you're losing the water cooler time, you're losing the happy hours. With something like Zoom, again, because it is one to many, one person at a time is talking, you're missing all of the sort of sidebars and the side chatter and the ability to have serendipity and to connect organically with each other in the hallway. And so, and those things, the bonds between individuals are the strength of a community, right? Without that, it's more of a newsletter almost, right? It's a broadcast to a group of people. And there's no connection between each other. And so using something like the metaverse to enhance remote work so that people actually feel connection to each other and therefore feel part of a community and don't leave and are more productive and feel like they're all working together towards something greater than themselves is one of the ways that people are using things like Topia and other metaverse platforms. And it's true for customers and as well. Thinking about that is another thing. People are less likely to churn as a customer when they feel that they're part of a community and they're able to learn from each other and they go to events with each other. We also see a lot of people within Topia using this for prospects to actually convert them, right? So demand gen, lead gen, turn them into a community. They're sharing ideas with each other and then ultimately converting into customers and then staying because now they're part of the customer community.
And I think when a lot of people think about the metaverse, they may think of the inspirations behind it, and that could be anything from Snow Crash, the book you mentioned there, and Ready Player One, and they all have less than favorable outcomes. So what are the ethical considerations of the evolving internet, do you think, especially around how to prevent those dystopian outcomes going from fiction to reality?
So Snow Crash and Ready Player One are very much dystopian futures, right? They are depicting dystopian outcomes of this technology. And, it's kind of ironic that we call it metaverse when in Snow Crash, that was not something that we should be striving for. And so I think the ethical consideration here is the internet is evolving. Things always evolve. Things always change. And what do we want the future to actually look like? So one way this could go, which is sort of depicted in both Snow Crash and Ready Player One, is replacing real life with digital life, with a digital metaverse. And I think that would be a very negative outcome here. What we're trying to do, my mission is to enhance access to community, to experiences, but not to replace them and bring them online. So one of the reasons that we actually made Topia as the first version of Topia in the showcase, it's two-dimensional. It's not meant to be a replacement of the kinds of things you can do in person, but instead meant to give people the opportunity to actually interact with a remote community and even interact with people in person when there's what we call a hybrid event where people are online and in person, they're able to interact with each other. The idea is now, instead of just having an event once a year that's really expensive to go to and where you have to travel across the world, you're able to stay at home. And if you're in India, you can join an event that's being held in San Francisco. And now we've reduced the socioeconomic and the geographical barriers to being part of a community. That's really powerful, right? There's also the idea of using the metaverse as an enhancement for the kinds of things that people are already doing around marketing, like having a website. So now having your own metaverse world that allow people to come and just have a more social, interesting experience with your content, that actually reduces loneliness, right? So when used these ways, it can be just enhancing access to community, but also to social experiences. And I think people just need to think about what are the goals for the different companies? What are their business models? And which of these business models are going to drive naturally towards recording their data, transcribing it, serving them more targeted ads, trying to get them to spend as much time as they possibly can in digital environments. Those kinds of things are very scary. And so, this landscape is going to have a big spectrum of, on the one hand, trying to make the world better for people and enhance access to community. And on the other side of the spectrum is trying to just replace real life and have people spend 100% of their time working, playing, living in a digital environment. And I think we need to be very nervous about that.
Yeah, 100% with you there. And I echo all the sentiments and everything you just said. And I'm curious, do you think there's also an importance of context and persistently available shared spaces when it's being used for deep human connection and community? Because there's arguably, half the reason that we've got so many problems in the world right now is that lack of context, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things with something like Zoom is that there is no context to the conversation. Yeah. And so being able to actually create a space and have social interactions and experiences inside of this customized space that's relevant to whatever you are trying to experience. As an example, us hanging out in a bar is very different than us sitting in a business meeting room. And the context of those two different environments makes a huge difference to the kind of interaction that we have. And so that is one of the aspects of the metaverse, of the promise of the metaverse, is that you can create that context. You can customize the space. You can create actual social experiences and games that allow people to really go deep into whatever kind of social interaction they're meant to have in that space. And then having persistently available shared spaces allows people to actually have a third space, to have a common area, to have a community gathering space where they know that they can go and they can find people that have shared interests within the context of whatever that space is. And so, we think that that's something that's going to be really important going forward to the human experience.
And a few of the things that I find particularly exciting is what happens when emerging technologies begin to converge. And an easy example, of course, is 5G and low latency data transfer from thousands of IoT devices. And then the insights from that are garnered from machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we're just starting to think like that now. But I'm curious, how do you think different technology trends will continue to converge into not only new systems, but new paradigm shifts too?
I think the biggest paradigm shifts we've seen actually are, like you're saying, from two disparate technologies that converge into a single system. And so one of the ways that happens is by having people from completely different industries or different technology branches work together, come together, even in the form of community, and talk about what they're doing and realize that there are synergies, there are potential opportunities, or there are problems out there that can be solved by intersecting their two different technology branches into one. And that's where a lot of the most incredible human advancement and innovation has occurred. But it's really hard to do that in isolation, right? It's really hard to just do that by yourself, sitting in front of a computer, not interacting with other people. Often we find that the human experience of sharing information, sharing ideas is what creates these intersections. And so I think it actually showcases the importance of coming together in person and the importance of having serendipity in a digital environment where people can, that otherwise may not have actually sought each other out because they're from completely different worlds, are able to intersect and are able to share their ideas and create a spark of something new that didn't exist before.
Absolutely love that. And there's a quote that I often use on this podcast, and that is, the last best experience that anyone has anywhere becomes the minimum expectation for the experience that they want everywhere. So with that in mind, how can listeners and business leaders prepare to gain skills and also shape those expectations for the future?
I think the easiest way to prepare for the future is to start using things now and not wait for the future to come.
Yeah.
And so platforms like Topia, the goal is it's browser based. You just click a link. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to be a gamer. It's really easy to navigate. We're trying to make it really easy to play with the metaverse now and get yourself familiar with it. Understand the concepts behind it. Start building communities that you're going to be able to bring with you into the future. And so, that's my advice to people, is just start playing with these technologies. Don't wait for the future. It's not overwhelming. You don't need VR headsets or any, super powerful computer or anything like that. There's a lot of platforms that are really easy to start with, and then you'll kind of understand, and you'll understand the implications for yourself, for your life, for your career, for your industry. And the time is now.
Oh, I'm fascinated to hear that. So anyone wanting to try this out, they don't need the VR headset and strapping that to their face now. Can you just walk me through how to get up and running, just for anyone listening out there that may be thinking of bringing this in or trying it in a work environment, just to maybe get a team together and see how they can get something out of it? What's the best way of getting up and running? And you just quickly walk me through that?
Yeah, so you just go to topia.io. There's a button there that says try it out. That'll bring you in, and you can create a demo world. You can have up to 25 people at a time in your demo world, and you can share that link then with anybody you want. They come right in. You can start editing the world, changing things, experiencing it, and it's browser based. So you literally just send the URL, and just like with something like Google Meet, it's going to ask you for microphone and video permissions. You say yes to both of those, and that's it. It uses your normal webcam, your normal microphone. There's no VR headset required, anything like that. And you're going to see each other like you do on a Google Meet or a Zoom. But you're going to be able to play around the space, walk around, connect and disconnect to each other, and really have that kind of human experience that's fun and playful and has the context of the world around you that you're able to easily modify. And you don't need to be a really talented graphic designer to even get started. We have a lot of templates, and we have a whole asset library. You can upload any image, any PNG that you want to the space. And so it's super, super easy. It takes 5 minutes to get started.
In a moment of serendipity, you just sparked an idea with myself there. So let's say, for example, my podcast community, if I wanted to interact with listeners, etc., is it easy to create a world for that kind of thing? And are people even doing that?
It's super easy. We have a lot of podcasters doing that sort of thing. And I didn't even mention this, but you can embed all sorts of content inside of the world itself. And it's spatially aware. So you can embed every one of your podcast episodes as a journey inside of your world. And now people can come in, your community can come in and engage in your podcast rather than being on YouTube by themselves. They can experience your podcast together with each other. And it now is a social, it's a directory of your content that they can socially interact with. And so it's transformational for content consumption. And you're making an experience. It's like a museum of your podcasts.
Wow, that's something I'm going to have to check out. And what about yourselves at Topia? Where do you go from here? What's next? Is there anything you can share about what you're focusing on?
We've been, we realized about 4 months ago that we had thousands of companies coming inbound to our website that we were not tracking. We weren't contacting. We've had something like 7,000 events over the last year and a half. And most of them, we didn't really even know what was going on. People are just using it. We're a platform, we're a technology. And so recently we started actually building a distribution team rather than just focusing on the technology, the architecture, the product itself. Now we are starting to actually distribute this, and we're getting some really powerful, positive results from that, and just positive sentiment. We're also realizing, and we started Topia with the intention of making it really easy for people to create their own metaverse ecosystems, kind of like every company, every person really has their own website. In the future, everybody's going to have their own metaverse ecosystem that is a tie-in to the broader metaverse, just like every website's a tie-in to the broader internet. And so our technology is perfectly built for this. And we were planning on doing it over the next few years, making it possible for people to create their own metaverse ecosystems where it sits on their own domain, ties into their authentication, so on and so forth. And we've gotten inbounded by some big tech companies, big gaming studios that want this now. And so we're starting to roll this out for customers as well. And that's been really exciting for us.
Incredibly cool. Well, we started the podcast talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. Now, as we come full circle, I'm asking you to leave everyone listening with a personal note of inspiration. And by that, I mean, is there a book that has inspired you that you'd like to add to our Amazon wish list, or a song, piece of music that we could add to our Spotify playlist? What would you like to leave us with today?
Oh, wow. Well, you probably get a lot of people recommending business books, but one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and I read it relatively recently, is something called Shantaram, which is it's a journey, it's an evolution, it's a origin story of somebody traveling through India, escaping to India and sort of becoming immersed in it. And I traveled to India. I lived in Bali and Thailand for a couple of years, digital nomad. And I found the book to be just incredibly powerful. The idea of having experiences, seeking experiences, building community, it can teach you a lot, and I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, I'll add that to our Amazon wish list. I'm interested in checking that out myself. But before I let you go, Topia, you mentioned the URL once or twice there, but just remind everyone listening where they can get started, best way of contacting your team, or just join your community and find out more information. What's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, if you go to topia.io, then you can click a button, get started. We have all of our socials. We have a whole Discord community. Links to that are at the bottom of the site. So topia.io. And you can email us at team@topia.io as well if you want to contact us. But just check it out, play with it, get started, see if you love it, bring people in, and then let us know. And I'm happy to talk to anybody that's really interested in it.
Well, I love chatting with you today about how companies can better use the metaverse today, not in the future, and start creating value for their prospects, customers, and community. But more than anything, I think it's that role of serendipity. I always say at the end of every episode, technology works best when it brings people together. And if I go back to my corporate life before I started doing this, and some of the best moments of serendipity were going to a water cooler, going to a coffee machine, and you were chatting to someone from a completely different department. You had nothing in common, but suddenly you both were experiencing a similar problem and you could both help each other out. Those are the magic moments that I think we've lost over the last few years. But just a big thank you for sharing your story and offering a new way forward to rediscover serendipity with technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Really appreciate you having me on. This is a lot of fun.
Wow. What do you think, gang? If I created a world in the metaverse, or a little community where we could all meet and talk with each other and not just have me talking into your ears every day, if I build it, would you come? Just say the word and I will manifest it right now. But please let me know your thoughts on anything we talked about today. What you liked, what you didn't like. What excites you about the future? What doesn't excite you about the future? I want to hear it all. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC. Hughes. And maybe the next time we meet could be in the metaverse. What do you think? please, if you want it to happen, let me know. You know, I have an open door policy, and I think there'd be something quite cool about learning about this world together and experiencing it without a headset. And together we can determine if it's worthwhile or not. What do you think? Well, let me know. Other than that, I'll be back tomorrow with another guest. We'll explore another technology and how it's impacting our lives, our work, and our world. But thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.